TAME Flight 120 was a Boeing 727-134 airliner registered HC-BLF and named El Oro that operated a scheduled international passenger flight between Quito, Ecuador and Cali, Colombia, with a scheduled stopover in Tulcán, Ecuador. On January 28, 2002, the plane crashed while attempting to land at Tulcán's Teniente Coronel Mantilla International Airport. The pilot made an incorrect approach in reportedly foggy conditions, and the plane crashed into the side of the volcano near Ipiales, Colombia at 10:23 a.m. The crash killed all of the passengers and crew. Why did that happen? What were the reasons behind it? Let's try to figure it out. The aircraft in question first took to the skies in 1967 and had previously served Transair Sweden, Air Madeira, and Philippine Airlines before being transferred to TAME. Jorge Efrain, 59, was the captain and one of TAME's flight instructors and most experienced pilots, with a total of 12,000 flight hours, including 8,200 hours on the Boeing 727. Carlos Alfonso Lopez, 52, was the first officer and was in training to become a captain. He had 7,000 flight hours, 3,400 of which were spent on the Boeing 727. Jorge Anibal Burgos Villamar, 50, was the flight engineer. He had 4,200 flight hours, including 3,000 on the 727. First Officer Lopez piloted the accident flight and sat in the left seat, while Captain No sat in the right seat and served as pilot in command. The Boeing 727-100 took off from runway 17 at 10:03 a.m. local time. The plane reached a cruising altitude of 18,000 feet and flew north-northeast along the G675 airway. The first leg between Quito and Tulcán was relatively short. At 10:15 a.m., HC-BLF contacted the Tulcán control tower, indicating that it was 29 miles from the Tulcán NDB. The crew was permitted to descend to 14,000 feet, as well as weather conditions and clearance for the approach. The NDB approach to runway 23 at Teniente Coronel Mantilla International Airport would take the plane directly over the airport, bearing 085 degrees. After 1.5 minutes, the plane would make a left turn to heading 233, flying at 180 knots IAS, and descending to a final altitude of 11,500 feet. The runway has an elevation of 9,679 feet, and numerous mountain ridges and peaks are in the vicinity of the airport, which is located high in the Andes Mountains. The Cumbal volcano, which rises to an elevation of 15,626 feet, is only about 20 miles west of the airport. El Oro approached from the southwest, passing slightly west of the NDB rather than directly over it. The pilot initiated the turn correctly, but the aircraft flew at 230 knots rather than 180 knots. This diverted the 727 from its intended path. By the time it turned west, it was flying into the side of the Cumbal volcano rather than towards the runway. At 10:23 a.m., the plane crashed into the side of the mountain, and no further contact was made with the flight. The impact occurred at an elevation of 14,700 feet, approximately 1,400 feet below the volcano's summit. The visibility was poor at the time of the accident, and the wreckage was not discovered for nearly a day. The investigation committee of the Special Administrative Unit of Civil Aeronautics determined the following as the most likely cause of the accident. 1. The pilot's decision to begin and continue the flight to Tulcán Airport while the minimum meteorological conditions established in the company's standard operating procedure were not met. 2. Inadequate navigation and operation of the aircraft by the pilot in command, consistent with entering the holding pattern at the Tulcán NDB with a velocity of 230 knots indicated and a bank angle of 15 degrees, exceeding the maximum limit of 180 knots stipulated throughout the procedure, and using a bank angle less than the recommended 25 to 30 degrees, resulting in a collision with the Cumbal volcano. While the 727 was flying at 14,700 feet at the time of the accident, Cumbal towers to around 15,630 feet, creating a significant terrain hazard for planes in the area. The collision with the stratovolcano killed all 94 people on board, and the wreckage was discovered the next day. Colombian authorities determined that the crash was caused by pilot error. They emphasized that the crew continued their approach despite meteorological conditions that did not meet TAME's standard operating procedures. The pilot's incorrect speed and bank angle in command when making the prescribed left turn were also major factors in the disaster. On January 28, 2002, TAME Flight 120, operated by an Embraer 120 Brasilia, crashed into the side of the volcano on its approach to Teniente Coronel Mantilla International Airport in Tulcán. All 92 people on board were killed, including 87 passengers and 5 crew members. The impact and subsequent fire destroyed the aircraft. The weather conditions at the time of the crash were difficult, according to the investigation, with low visibility, rain, and fog. The cloud base was lower than the minimum descent altitude for the airport approach. These conditions hampered visual navigation and made it difficult for the pilot to see the mountainous terrain ahead. The accident was determined to be a case of controlled flight into terrain, CFIT, which means that the aircraft was under the control of the flight crew, but inadvertently flew into the ground. The aircraft showed no signs of mechanical failure or malfunction. Due to the limited visibility and difficult approach to the airport, which is surrounded by mountainous terrain, the crew's situational awareness could have been better. The investigation revealed that the flight crew decided to continue the approach even though the weather conditions were below the minimum required for a safe approach. The crew also deviated from the prescribed approach path, causing the plane to descend too low and too soon. The crew's decision-making abilities and adherence to standard operating procedures were questioned. Tulcán's airport lacked certain navigational aids, such as an instrument landing system, ILS, which could have aided the flight crew in making a safe approach in poor visibility. Instead, the approach relied on visual cues that were obscured by the weather. According to the investigation, the captain had extensive flight experience, but there were concerns about his training and familiarity with the approach to Tulcán. The first officer lacked experience, and the crew's overall performance suffered due to the ineffective communication and coordination. The aircraft lacked a Terrain Awareness and Warning System, TAWS, which could have alerted the crew to the aircraft's proximity to the ground. According to the investigation, the lack of TAWS contributed to the accident. The investigation uncovered flaws in the airline safety culture and oversight by aviation authorities. There were areas for improvement in flight crew training and supervision, and insufficient risk assessments for flight operations in hazardous environments. Several recommendations were made in the final report to improve aviation safety. These included improving airport navigation aids, implementing TAWS on aircraft, improving crew training and decision-making, and strengthening airline regulatory oversight. TAME Flight 120's crash was a tragic and avoidable accident. According to the investigation, the primary cause of the crash was controlled flight into terrain due to the crew's decision to continue the approach in poor weather conditions and deviations from the prescribed approach path. A lack of navigation aids, insufficient crew training and coordination, and the absence of TAWS were all factors. The investigation's findings and recommendations emphasized the need for comprehensive safety measures to prevent similar accidents in the future. Overall, the investigation into TAME Flight 120's crash catalyzed changes in Ecuador's aviation safety standards and practices. The lessons learned from this tragic accident have helped improve air travel safety for passengers and crew. The investigation's findings and recommendations are a valuable resource for the aviation industry and regulators, guiding efforts to reduce risk and improve safety outcomes in flight operations, particularly in difficult environments with mountainous terrain and variable weather conditions. The investigation into TAME Flight 120 had an impact beyond Ecuador, as the findings informed broader discussions about aviation safety on a global scale. As a result, the implementation of safety protocols such as TAWS, improved flight crew training programs, and the enhancement of airport navigation aids have all contributed to lowering the risk of similar accidents in the future. Finally, the TAME Flight 120 investigation revealed critical safety considerations that have since been addressed to improve aviation safety standards in Ecuador and elsewhere. While the loss of life in this accident is a painful reminder of the dangers of air travel, the positive changes that have emerged in its aftermath demonstrate the aviation community's commitment to learning from tragedies and working towards safer skies for all. Thank you for stopping by to watch. Please subscribe to the channel and post your video recommendations in the comments area if you'd like us to do more films like this.